That's right, my top 20 EPs. Someone's got to do it. Edwin Canistracci here, and like I said, doing my top 20 EPs, extended play, drinking a little Johnny Walker Black Label. It's late, so I'm going to try to keep my voice down. That's hard because I am an Italian American, so I tend to be kind of loud. That also explains the hand gestures. And I did my research. I got a lot of research here because, hey, I'm only doing the top 20 EPs only once in my life, and I want to get it right. So EPs are kind of a funny thing. We don't talk about them that much, but they're out there. They're pretty much the novella of the music world. For you not totally hip to the literary scene, novellas are like small, they're short novels that aren't quite long enough to be novels, but they're too long to be short stories. Sometimes there's even debate. There's a debate on whether or not The Great Gatsby is a novel or a novella. Word count wise, it's a novella, but because it's considered the great American novel, people tend to want to think of it as a novel. EPs are kind of similar. Just like novellas, there's sometimes some EPs are kind of technically an album, or sometimes they're really just like a maxi single. There's not like one definitive verdict on what makes an EP an EP. Google says stores consider an EP when it's 4 to 6 tracks with a total running time of 30 minutes or less. Or it's 1 to 3 tracks with one track at least 10 minutes long and a total running time of 30 minutes or less. That's pretty specific. Wikipedia says a modern EP usually is defined between 4 and 6 tracks, with some sources setting a maximum of 7 tracks or 28 minutes. You know what I say? Looking at all the releases that I know people refer to as EPs, I'd say generally speaking, what I consider an EP, it's 4 to 7 tracks. 4 to 7 tracks, and it's 30 minutes or under. So that's my definition pretty much. You know, there are sometimes, you know, I know there's a lot of punk singles, like a lot of Misfit singles and stuff, where there would be 3 tracks, and sometimes they consider that an EP. But, you know, I don't, because A, one of the tracks ain't 10 minutes, especially in punk rock cases and like the Misfits. Also like Blag Flag, some people refer to the 6-pack single as an EP. But I don't, because it's like 6-pack, and then there's 2 songs which are like the B-sides. To me, that's a single. Like Creeping Death was a single with then the Garage Days Revisited, you know, those 2 covers as the B-side. So those are singles. I'm not counting those as EPs, you know, and I'm not counting maxi singles that had like 4 or 5 club remixes and shit, you know. That's not an EP. To me, an EP is, for the most part, it's something that where a band came together and put together about 4 to 7 songs. It wasn't like quite enough to be an album, but it was more than a single. It was its own little thing. It's like a mini album. That's how I think of EPs, and that's even it's more than just about the track listing too, and even the time. There's kind of an aesthetic to EPs where they're kind of like this. This is like something for the fans, you know, the hardcore people. Like I think that's the reason why EPs, for the most part, have only really been popular in underground rock for the most part. Well, generally more popular in England than in America. Even going back in the 60s, the Beatles and the Stones and Who, they all had EPs, little EPs that in America we didn't have. But then, like the new wave British heavy metal, you know, influenced, you know, some underground thrash bands. So the thrash bands in the 80s kind of did some EPs, and punk rock, a lot of punk rock, whether it was in England or America, they did a lot of EPs. And that aesthetic was carried on into the 90s, where I kind of think that's kind of the golden era of EPs. Like there were a lot of alternative rock and indie rock and grunge bands. They just had a lot of EPs, and I remember that. That was a time where, you know, I was a teenager and into a lot of different kinds of rock music, and I just, you know, EPs were just something kind of fun and cool, and it was something for the hardcore fans. That's kind of how I thought of them. And what's fun about this is, as you know from some of my other videos, I have very eclectic taste, but for the most part, most of my videos have focused on hard rock and heavy metal because that's what a lot of you guys like. You know, I know you guys out there, that's what you like. Right now, it seems like I got the fucking Blue Army It's like an Aerosmith concert in 1978. It's all right. Don't mind that. That's cool. But hey, we could bring in a little diversity here. And maybe with the EPs, the top 20 EPs, I'll do that. Because the top 20 EPs, rest assured, metalheads and hard rock bros, especially when I get into my top 10, there's going to be some shit you like. But from 11 to 20, you're going to see some 90s indie rock and alternative rock and things that normally I don't talk about, but I am a fan of. I'm a big fan of a lot of that stuff. I might blow your mind with a few of my choices, but here we go. It's a pretty diverse list. It's pretty much all rock oriented, although different kinds of rock, because like I said before, it was a format that was kind of popular in rock and especially underground rock, but not really popular in other genres, not really popular in jazz and country and R&B. So it's primarily kind of a rock thing for the most part. A lot of times, like the indie rock and the punk rock crowd is at odds with the metal crowd, and the metal and hard rock crowd is at odds with them, and these worlds collide on this list. I was the type of cat when I was a teenager. Saturday night I watched Ted Banger's Ball, but then Sunday night I watched 120 Minutes. They later retitled it Alternative Nation, but I preferred 120 Minutes. I was that kind of guy. I liked a lot of different kinds of music. So with that being said, maybe I'll open some of your minds. Maybe I'll turn some of you indie rockers to metal and some of you metalheads to indie rock, or maybe you'll just like what you like and whatever. So let's do it. Let's go to it. Let's do this. Let's do the top 20 EPs. Extended play. More than a single, not quite an album. EPs. Let's do it. Boom. Starting off the list is EP that I talked about, actually. I talked about it in The World of David Coverdale Part 1 video. Here we go. Number 20, Whitesnake, Snake Bite. Snake Bite from 1978. Only released in the UK. Remember I said these EPs, especially in the 60s and 70s, were more of a UK thing than a US thing. Now, I love this EP. To me, this was better than what their first album would be. Trouble. I think this was better than Trouble. Sometimes an EP, and some of these EPs, I do prefer to albums. In some of these cases, I think one or two of these EPs are my favorite thing the band ever did. So sometimes it's just nice. It's just like a nice shot. It's like perfect. It's like perfect 30 minutes, It's just 30 minutes. It's just like a nice glass of scotch. You could drink it in 30 minutes, then you move on to something else. Life's short. It's just straight up bluesy cock rock. We got the tracks here. We got Bloody Mary, Steal Away, Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City. That's right, a Whitesnake classic. Actually a cover, but they made it their own. They would always play this. This would become a staple live. It's a sexy song. I love it. Coverdale's voice is great. It's awesome. And then the song Come On. Come On, one of their best songs, a rockin' number, great opener in their early days, and this is a great EP. It was a great way for David Coverdale to go from his first two solo albums to introduce now a band, his band, Whitesnake, with Mickey Moody and Bernie Marsden playing guitar, and this is great. This is before he brought in some of those Deep Purple cats to help flesh out the lineup and make it the ultimate Whitesnake lineup. So it's not quite there yet, but still it's a pretty good lineup. And you got Martin Birch producing it. Martin Birch is an amazing producer. R.I.P. He passed away last year, and he produced all the best Whitesnake albums, in my opinion. He did Iron Maiden. He did the Dio era Black Sabbath albums. He did a lot of classic albums. He did a Blue Oyster Cult's Fire of Unknown Origin. I love this guy. This guy, Martin Birch, he's awesome. He's a great producer. One of the great producers of the 80s. And he produced this, and it's just down and dirty, bluesy cock rock. I love it. In England, in addition to the EP, like I think a year or so later, they re-released it yet again, but with some songs from David Coverdale's second solo album, North Winds, and kind of expanded it out to be an album. And also subsequent, I believe in the US and perhaps in other territories as well, they would add these tracks to Trouble, their first album, the first Whitesnake album. And I believe most subsequent versions of Trouble would have these songs included. So I think most American people think of these songs as songs from Trouble. And these songs definitely beef up Trouble and make it a better debut. The way I have it set up on my music library on my computer is I recreate the EPs. I like the EPs. You know, a lot of these EPs are out of print and you don't really have them anymore, or unless you spend a lot of money, you know, to get the vinyl. And some of these EPs were never even released in digital format. But if you have the songs, and you get the songs, a lot of times I get them as bonus tracks. Rather than hear the bonus tracks at the end of an album, which I think upsets the flow of the album, I prefer to have them off on their own, the way the band originally recorded them and intended them to be. And it's fun to create a little virtual EP in my music library, you know, and I find the EP cover art and I do it. And hey, you might say it's OCD, but I think it's fucking awesome and I love doing that and it's fun. And then I'm listening like, yeah, this is what the band wanted. They just wanted it to be this little short in and out thing, and that's why I like to create it that way. So I'd rather hear Snakebite as Snakebite rather than some extra tracks on Trouble. That's how I roll, and that's how I do this, and that's how I've done all these EPs that are usually you find as bonus tracks, and then you can recreate them. So hey, if you want to have some fun, I suggest you do that. So anyway, so that's number 20, Whitesnake, Snakebite. Great EP, an introduction to the band. A couple of these, I think there's one or two more that will also be debuts as well. So sometimes a band debuts with an EP instead of an album, because usually they don't have enough money to do an album, but they do an EP and then people go, hey, that's not bad. Here's some money. Make an album now. Number 19. All right. You didn't see this one coming, but it's coming right at you. Here we go. Number 19, Veruca Salt. Blow It Out Your Ass. It's Veruca Salt. What a title. I love that title. That's probably my favorite title of this bunch here. Blow It Out Your Ass. It's Veruca Salt. 1996 it came out. Now, yeah, I like Veruca Salt. I think that they were a decent girl rock band of the mid-90s. Cool rockin' chicks, especially Louise Post. I had a real crush on her. Still have a crush on her. She's a very beautiful lady and a really cool chick and a really cool songwriter. And I liked a lot of her stuff. And Nina Gordon wrote some good stuff too. And let's see what the tracks are here. It's Shimmer Like a Girl, I'm Taking Europe With Me, New York Mining Disaster 1996, and my favorite track on it, Disinherit. Steve Albini produced this. Legendary producer, alt-rock producer, Steve Albini, who did In Utero for Nirvana. He also did The Breeders Pod, and I'm a fan, especially of this period. He also did some cool stuff with his own band, Big Black. I like the album Songs About Fucking. This is one of my favorite Steve Albini productions. It's a really cool production. It was beefier. This came out after their first album, and it showed a kind of beefier, darker, meatier side than what their first album, which was more kind of playful indie rock. And this kind of was like, oh, we're getting darker and we're getting a little more metal. This has kind of a metal influence, especially the Louise Post songs. And she always was a little more metal than Nina Gordon was. Another reason why Louise is my favorite. She's kind of a metal chick. And especially her song Disinherit. Ooh, it's like doom metal. It's almost like the way I describe the song is it sounds like Neil Young from his Ditch period, the mid-70s, his best period, doing a doom metal song. If you can imagine mid-70s Neil Young doing a doom metal song with a chick singing, then you kind of have an idea what Disinherit sounds like. It's a really cool song. I love it. And, you know, if you're a fan of Hole and I would say The Breeders, and especially like Nirvana, especially Nirvana produced by Steve Albini, then this is a must listen. It's kind of an obscure EP. It might be even out of print, but you can get it on the Amazon Marketplace, I'm sure. It's really cool. I dig it. It's my favorite thing Veruca Salt ever did. And I do really like the album they did subsequently, 8 Arms to Hold You, Bob Rock produced. A nice, punchy kind of chick metal album. Really cool. But this is my favorite thing they ever did. Blow It Out Your Ass. It's number 19. So there you go. Let's see what's next. Ooh. Oh, you might have heard of this band. Number 18. The Beatles. Long Tall Sally. Some of you people might be like, what the hell's Long Tall Sally? I don't know what this is. Well, that's because it was originally just released in the UK in 1964. These are the 4 tracks. Long Tall Sally. Great Little Richard song which this is the first time Paul McCartney does his screaming Little Richard kind of impersonation, which makes sense. It's a Little Richard song. And this great screaming voice is something he would develop further in songs like I'm Down, all the way through to Helter Skelter and Oh Darling, and even into his solo career with stuff like Monkberry Moon Delight and Beware My Love. Like that great, awesome, ballsy, balls out McCartney voice. The first appearance of that voice is this song, and that's one of the reasons why I love this EP. It's fucking rock and roll and it's ballsy. Then we have I Call Your Name, one of the great John Lennon songs. Lennon-McCartney composition, but I think it's mainly John's song. He's the lead vocalist anyway. It's a wonderful song. Great guitar hook, great melodies. One of my favorite Beatles songs. I love I Call Your Name. Then there's Slow Down. That's a great rock and roll song, John singing. And then Carl Perkins' Matchbox. Great cover of that song with Ringo singing. And I always like how Ringo sings, especially the more kind of country-fried, rockabilly type stuff. And this has kind of got that kind of groove. Carl Perkins always was a little... kind of like Elvis, he straddled the country and rock and roll. And this is great. So you got Long Tall Sally, I Call Your Name, Slow Down, and Matchbox. 4 songs. They released it after their first 2 albums in the UK. And they were like, boom, here you go. Here's something for you Beatle fanatics. In America, however, they didn't get a Long Tall Sally. They didn't, because, EPs weren't that popular in America. And Capitol had their own way of doing things and releasing their albums. 2 of the songs went on the Beatles' second album. The Capitol album was called the Beatles' second album. Pretty much had all the covers that were from With the Beatles that they didn't include in the Capitol album, Meet the Beatles. So essentially, the Beatles' second album in the US was the covers from With the Beatles with 2 songs from this album, which resulted in a pretty cool album. It's good rock and roll. It's like their rootsy rock and roll album. And so I do like that album a lot. And then the other 2 songs went on the subsequent Capitol album, Something New, which argumented them with songs from the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. So it gets all kind of mixed up a little bit. But the way the Beatles intended it to be heard was in this EP. This is how they knocked out these songs, and it's a really cool EP, and this is the way the Beatles wanted you to listen to it, and this is the way I think you should listen to it. A couple years ago, there was like a record day release too, where they actually released this EP to the American market for the first time. If you had the Past Masters or the Mono Masters and Stereo Masters that came out in the remasters, the tracks are on there, and that's how I recreated this. I recreated the mono Long Tall Sally EP, and it's really cool, and it's one of my favorite EPs to listen to. If you're a Beatles fan, go into your Stereo Masters or Mono Masters or Past Masters or whatever you got ripped, take these songs out, put them aside, create their own little magical EP, and you'll see it's a great little punch of rock and roll. Okay, number 17, talking about punch, here we go. 17, it's Blag Flag, Jealous Again, 1980. Okay. This is one of the greatest punk EPs ever. I love it. It's not even with my favorite Blag Flag singer. My favorite Blag Flag singer is actually the third one, Des Cadena. Is that how you say his name? Des Cadena. Or Cadena. I think, that's it. Anyway, Des Cadena, the third singer, the one that Henry Rollins, who's the fourth singer, was mimicking. Like, he pretty much is doing Dez. Like, he's just singing like Dez. So Henry Rollins' whole way of singing is based on another dude that most people don't know about. So, hey, just saying. I mean, he did a good job, and my favorite Blag Flag album slided in with Henry Rollins. So I'm not, like, dissing Henry Rollins. I'm just saying that his whole way of singing is just... I'm just saying that he is imitating a guy that people outside of hardcore punk circles don't even know about. And Henry Rollins went on to greater success than this Dez guy ever did. So I'm just saying recognize Dez Cadena. But hell, he's not even in the band here. So why am I talking so much about this guy? I should be talking about Ron Reyes. Ron Reyes is the singer. He's the second singer for Blag Flag. Punk bands, they were all fucked up. So they Blag Flag especially. So they were going through singers a lot. This EP is with their second singer, Ron Reyes. And if you see the movie The Decline of Western Civilization, he's the singer in Blag Flag in that in that documentary. So he came in after Keith Morris, who did the first EP with them. And I'll admit, I'm never a big fan of Keith Morris. His voice was a little shrill to me, a little too much of a Johnny Rotten wannabe. It kind of annoyed me. Now, Ron is a little similar to that. He's got a little touch of that wannabe Johnny Rotten too, but not as much. He's not quite as shrill. So I do prefer him. I do like Dez and Henry Rollins better than him, but I do like this guy better than Keith Morris. But whoever's the singer, there's no doubt that this is one of the best things Blag Flag ever did. I love this EP, and it's a real EP too. You know, some people consider, with Dez, even though it's great, they consider the Six Pack single an EP, but that's just 3 tracks. No, that's not an EP. That's a single. But this is an EP. This is a goddamn EP. 5 tracks. It's very EP-ish. Anywhere between 4 and 6 tracks, and you're in the sweet spot for an EP, in my opinion. Anyway, so we got Jealous Again, the title track of the EP. We got the song Revenge. We got White Minority, No Values. You Bet We've Got Something Personal Against You. Man, this is some great goddamn shit. It's just rocking. Greg Ginn, he's a cool guy. This is on his label, SST Records, which I'm a big fan of SST Records in the 80s. And I love the aesthetic. It's just straight up, do it yourself, kind of California punk rock. And it's got energy, it's got attitude to me. It brings that, it's kind of obviously inspired by the British punk rock, but bringing in that American X factor. Not unlike what the thrash bands like Metallica and Slayer did with the new wave of British heavy metal influence, you know? They take something from England and then they mix in their X factor to it. So you can hear a little early Clash and Sex Pistols in this, but they do their own California thing, you know? Their own kind of reactionary California thing. And I love the songs. I love the attitude. It just boom, 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 boom. I think it's one of the best things Blag Flag ever did. Big fan. You should check it out if you like punk rock. Well, if you like punk rock, I'm sure you've listened to this. And if not, definitely listen to it. Blag Flag, Jealous Again. Number 17. Number 16. Back to the 90s. Here we go. The Breeders. Safari from 1992. Now this is another example when I said sometimes the EP is my favorite thing the band did, even more than any album. Well, here's an example of that. This is my favorite thing the Breeders ever did. I do love The Pod. I think that's good. And their last album, All Nerve, was a real surprise a couple years ago. I was like, wow, the Breeders actually released a really great album just a couple years ago. But push comes to shove, this is my favorite thing the Breeders ever did. 4 songs. Very EP. Do You Love Me Now? Now, this is a song that they re-recorded the following year for their big breakthrough Last Splash album. That's the album that had Cannonball on it. And they did, you know, it was all right. I didn't mind that version on that album, but I prefer this earlier version. I prefer, it's a little more straight up. I actually think it's a little more melodic and prettier, this version, ironically, compared to the one that's on the subsequent big breakthrough album. And I think part of the reason is because Tanya Donnelly's still in the band. Tanya Donnelly is most people would know her from Belly, the band Belly, and the album Star. She did that song Feed the Tree, which was a hit. And I always liked her, always had a little bit of a crush on her too. And she was a really cool songwriter, really talented guitarist. You know, she used to wear a scrunchie. I like the fact that she was a rocker chick, but yet she wore a scrunchie, which was a very 90s thing to do. And I think her background harmony, she would harmonize with Kim Deal. And I feel like, even though I do like their subsequent stuff, I feel like after Pod and Safari, I kind of miss Tanya Donnelly's backing vocals. You know, I feel that they added a melodic element to the band, and she harmonized nicely with Kim. But what's really cool about this EP is this is the only Breeders release that has both Tanya and Kelly Deal, Kim Deal's twin sister, who she brought in on this album, who essentially would replace Tanya on Last Splash and subsequent albums. So this is the only Breeders album to have both Tanya and Kelly working with Kim, you know? And you see it in the Safari video. And the Safari, the title track, the song Safari, is my absolute favorite Breeder song and one of my favorite rock songs from the 90s. This song fucking is amazing. Awesome song. I love it. It's savage, catchy. It's really unique. It's like nothing that any other band besides the Breeders would create. And I like Cannonball, but to me, this is so much better. It's one of my favorite videos, too, from the 90s. The band looks really cool in it. I mean, you know, Tanya's there for, like, scrunchy, and Kelly Deal looks like she just got off work from a bank job, and they're just up there, and it's just a cool video. It's got a cool vibe. I love Safari. I mean, that alone would put that in my top 20, that song alone. But the whole EP is great. It ends with So Sad About Us, which is a cover of a Who song, and that's a decent cover. But this is, to me, it's like a perfect hybrid between their more underground, darker indie rock from Pod to the poppier, more MTV-friendly alternative rock from Last Splash. This is that sweet spot right in the middle, and that's why I love Safari, and that's why it's number 16. Number 15, you know this guy, I did 2 videos about him. Prince, The Scandalous Sex Suite. Yeah, there you go. How could you not dig that? The Scandalous Sex Suite, 1989. Now, this is one that is technically not considered an EP, but I don't care what some people say and what Wikipedia says. I say it's an EP, and I'll tell you why. They say on the Wikipedia they consider this a single or a maxi single, but it's not. This is why it's not. Okay, it's complicated. So bear with me. This is the thing. Okay, if you know Prince, you know he did the Batman album from '89. That was actually the first Prince album I ever got. So I have very nostalgic feelings about that album, and it's what got me into Prince, you know. And it's a cool album. I still think that album's great. It's actually it holds up really well. It's just a great Prince album, regardless of Batman. Anyway, so the song "Scandalous" is a song from that album. It plays during the end credits of Batman. Tim Burton's Batman from '89. And it's an amazing song. One of Prince's best songs. It's a ballad. It's a sexy R&B ballad with synth strings, and it's just got this groove and mood, and I love it. I've always loved this song. Interestingly enough, he wrote it with his dad. He co-wrote it with John L. Nelson, his father, who's a jazz composer. I just always thought that was odd because it's like such a sexy, intimate song. It's just like it doesn't feel like a song you'd write with your dad. But hey, you know, whatever. Maybe that's why Prince is Prince. Maybe his dad's like Prince, you know? They're just 2 sexy guys writing a song. Anyway, so it's a great song. I love it. But the single was not The Scandalous Sex Suite. 2 different things released around the same time, and it's weird. Prince released essentially like a 7-inch single with which was connected to, you know, Batman. I think it had like a bat logo on it. And that was the LP version of the song of the one from the Batman album. And that was the single. But then he released this other EP on CD, which was not that version. It's not the version on the album. It has elements of that, but he decided to expand it into a suite. And he broke it up into 3 parts, which are the crime, the passion, and the rapture. So it's 3 tracks, and it's this long, it's over 10 minutes, suite, and it's its own thing, and that's why I consider it an EP. And he fleshed out, he added another song, some lost track, I don't know, it sounds like it could be even from the Camille sessions, called Sex. It's called Sex, that's the name of the song, but there's a really long parenthesis. So the song's called Sex, but in the parentheses is the 80s are over and the time has come for monogamy and trust. Okay, it's a very late 80s thing because of HIV and stuff, I think, going on. And maybe Prince was feeling that for at least, I don't know, 6 months until he started fucking around again. Anyway, and that's a cool song, cool little funky song. And then also they threw on When Two Are in Love, which was from both Love Sexy and the Black album. But who cares about that, because we already got that on 2 other albums, so we don't need it again. What this is about is the Scandalous Sex Suite. And the Scandalous Sex Suite is, to me, not a single, not a maxi single. It's its own weird Prince thing that's not quite a single and not quite an album. So what do we call something? What do we call something when it's 4 to 5 tracks and it's not quite a single and it's not quite an album and it's under 30 minutes? I call that an EP. So goddamn it, I'm calling the Prince Scandalous Sex Suite an EP. And it's great. And if you're into the sexier side of Prince and R&B and want something silky and something to play if you're a lady, then fucking play this. This will get everyone in the mood, even the people living next door if they're listening in. And one other interesting bit of trivia is Kim Basinger's on this. She's on the first part, the crime part. She's talking and doing this sexy spoken word of Prince because at this time, as you might know, she played Vicky Vale. And I had the poster in junior high. I had a big crush on Vicky Vale, and I had a Vicky Vale poster in my room. So I'd be like listening to the Batman soundtrack and looking at the Vicky Vale poster. And that's how I became a sexual creature. That's how I learned the birds and the bees, baby. Anyway, so Vicky Vale looking beautiful in that poster and listening to this. And then Prince in real life. This is what's so cool about Prince. He showed up on the Batman set. And he didn't have to be on the set. He was just showing up in the set, I think, because he had his eye on Kim. And, it's Prince. It ain't Jack Nicholson. It ain't Michael Keaton. It ain't Tim Burton. It's Prince that comes in there and puts his sensors on Kim Basinger, who was in peak babe mode at that period for life. And it's Prince that seduces her. He's the real life Batman, and he comes in and he seduced Kim Basinger, and they had a really passionate, sexy romance. And this EP is the document of it. Kim Basinger does sexy spoken word of Prince, and she moans, and it's sexy and it's hot. And if you want to know something about the love between Prince and Kim Basinger, this fleeting, passionate, sexy thing, then all you gotta do is listen to the Scandalous Sex Suite. Number 15. Boom. Number 14. Wow, let's keep it going. We'll keep it going back to some a little alternative rock, some girls from the 90s, some ladies. Let's show respect. Luscious Jackson, In Search of Manny. One of my favorite all-time EPs. In fact, I felt kind of bad that this didn't make my top 10, but hell, there was just 13 EPs that I thought that I liked even better. Because this has always been one of my favorite EPs, and it's my favorite thing Luscious Jackson ever did. So again, the EP is the best thing, in my opinion, that this band ever did. Although I like all of Luscious Jackson's stuff, especially the Fever In, Fever Out album. But this is my favorite thing they ever did. So Luscious Jackson, for some of you who forgot who they were, because they're kind of a forgotten band from the mid to late 90s. They were on Grand Royal, the Beastie Boys independent label that did have distribution of Capitol. Luscious Jackson, the members of Luscious Jackson were friends with the Beastie Boys, going back to their teen years. And this actually gets discussed a bit in that new Apple TV documentary thing they did with the Beastie Boys. But anyway, so Luscious Jackson were old high school, like teenage friends of the Beastie Boys. So when the Beastie Boys started their own label, Grand Royal, first thing they did was they hooked up Luscious Jackson. And it's Jill Cuniff and what was her name? Gabby Glaser. Jill Cuniff and Gabby Glaser, they were two ladies, the main songwriters of the group. And they put together this EP. I think it was like the first thing that came out after Check Your Head was this. And I remember, I think it was 120 minutes. I don't think it was Alternative Nation yet. I think it was 120 minutes where I saw the Daughters of Chaos. I saw that video for that. That was the first time I was introduced to Luscious Jackson. And it blew me away. I loved the video. I loved the sound of the band. I just was like, I gotta get this because I was a big Beastie Boys fan, still a big Beastie Boys fan. And this was essentially like the female Beastie Boys. Not in the sense that they're like rapping and sounding like the Beastie Boys, but in the sense that they have that kind of vibe, where it's kind of the kitchen sink aesthetic of it's like hip hop meets a little rock, meets a little punk, meets a little. Yeah, it's like a mixture of things, and it just has that New York vibe, and I really like that vibe. And let's see, the tracks are Let Yourself Get Down, kind of a hip-hop kind of song. Life of Leisure, another kind of hip-hop song, kind of funky, cool, little jazzy in spots. Daughters of Chaos, I love it. It's got kind of a flamenco guitar thing, and again, hip-hoppy, and I really love that song. Keep on Rocking It. That's where they start showing another side. Keep on Rocking It has a little bit of a hip-hop spirit to it, but it's also kind of indie rock. The guitars and the feeling of it's kind of like an indie rock song with a hip-hop vibe. And I love that song. And then my favorite song on the album is She Be Wanting It More. Again, kind of combined. It's kind of a hip-hop song. It uses a sample from Neil Young's Don't Let It Bring You Down, which is one of my favorite Neil Young songs. But they make it their own. They do this really cool thing. It's really cool. Bam Bam's cool instrumental. Satellites is kind of rockabilly sounding indie rock country song, and that's it. That's the EP. So primarily I'd say it's kind of it's some white girls coming in and making a hip-hop record with an indie rock aesthetic, very ahead of its time. I love it. To me, and I lived in New York twice in my life, and it captures that feeling. It captures the feeling in the New York streets. It's, if you love Check Your Head and like Ill Communication, you definitely got to get In Search of Manny. It's one of the great EPs from the 90s. It's the lady Check Your Head, but nice and sweet. And hey, not quite 30 minutes. It's an EP. Number 13. This is probably one of the most best known EPs on this list. Alice in Chains, Jar of Flies from 1994. That's right, Jar of Flies. You know this. You gotta know this. This was there was a really big hit song from this. This one is technically should be counted as an album. That's right. 7 tracks, and it's actually over 30 minutes. It's over 30 minutes by like by a second. Literally a second. But I considered it an EP because everyone considers it an EP. Everyone calls it an EP. So even though technically it's 1 second over 30 minutes, this is one of the EPs that's straddling the line between an EP and an album. It's very close to being an album. But you know what? Ultimately, I'm going to say it's an EP. I'm going to say it's an EP, and not just because everyone else calls it an EP. I'm going to call it an EP because, hell, it's essentially 30 minutes. And 7 tracks is still under 8 tracks, which is generally what an album is, kind of the minimum number for an album, unless the songs are really long. And these songs aren't really long. But there's more to it. Remember when I said earlier there's an aesthetic to EP? There's an aesthetic here that's kind of an EP aesthetic, because it's not your normal Alice in Chains album. Kind of like Sap, which we may or may not discuss, who knows. That's another EP they did 2 years prior to this. Sap, which definitely was an EP, they did a more acoustic side and showed a kind of a more melodic and softer side of Alice in Chains from the more metal grunge that they were known for. And Jar of Flies continued with this. So essentially this was Sap Part 2. So that's another reason why I consider this an EP, because it kind of works with Sap. In fact, like about a year ago, there was a reissue of the vinyl where they put the two together, and they put them together as 2 EPs. So the aesthetic to me of an EP is also like, this is a thing you put between albums, a thing to keep the fans interested, and sometimes it could be something a little different. And that's what Alice in Chains did with Sap and Jar of Flies, was they showed the kind of an acoustic side, a side that's a little different from their heavier side, the heavier side of Facelift and Dirt. And that's what this was. And man, it's great. Rotten Apple, love that song. It has a little bit of a 70s vibe, like a lot of grunge does, but it's kind of a trippy kind of, almost I'd say like, if you know, like Planet Caravan, Black Sabbath, like it has that vibe where it's kind of trippy and dark. It's like a ballad, but it's not like a love song ballad. It's just kind of dark, and it has an atmosphere to it. I love it. Nutshell, same thing with that. It kind of like essentially part 2 of Rotten Apple keeps that vibe, and I love that vibe. It's great. Great harmonies. Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley always had these really amazing harmonies. I love their harmonies, and they really shine, especially in the softer songs like this. I Stay Away, which was also a single from this album, had a cool claymation video. I always love this song. Very 70s, very unique. Has a little bit of a hard rock element that comes in with the distorted wah-wah guitar and stuff. So it's probably the one song that gets kind of heavy on this album. But it also has an acoustic melodic side, and strings come on, and it's beautiful. It's like almost like, it's kind of Zeppelin-esque. And I always love this song. No Excuses, that's the big hit from the album. You know this, they still play it a lot on classic rock radio. I love the song, always love the song. Just a great, great classic rock song. It's not a ballad, but it is kind of a love song. It's kind of a dark, wistful, again, kind of Zeppelin-esque kind of love song. It has a kind of going through the desert kind of vibe to it. And it's great. It's something that really separated Alice in Chains from their competitors, from their peers. The other bands weren't doing songs like this. And it's one of the things that makes Alice in Chains seems kind of timeless and not quite as dated as some of the other bands from that era. So I love that. Whale and Wasp is all right. Don't Follow's a nice kind of ballad. Swing on This, not so crazy about that. But for the most part, though, but I ain't complaining. The first 4 songs alone are enough for me to love this. And this is Alice in Chains, Jar of Flies. You probably know this, and you probably love this. And if not, you should listen to it again, because it's aged really well. Number 12, The Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour. 1967, The Beatles, again, wow. And you're thinking right now, wait a minute, ain't that an album? No, because I'm talking about the original UK release. The original UK release was an EP. In fact, it was something really weird. It was a double EP. Well, if it's a double EP, why is it not an album? It was a double EP because time-wise, it was an EP. It was under 30 minutes. But it was put on 2 7-inch records. So it's like 2 7-inch records with the book, which is also included in the Capitol album version. And that's how it was released. So it was released as they called the 2 7-inches, they called it a double EP because that was the overall time. And the track listing's different, and it's just the songs that were part of the TV special. And that's Magical Mystery Tour, Your Mother Should Know, I Am the Walrus, The Fool in the Hill, Flying, and it ended with Blue Jay Way. So that was the original track listing, just the songs from the TV special, and that's how it was released as the double EP. Then, subsequently in America, Capitol Records rearranged the track listing a little bit and added a couple singles and B-sides, also from 1967, to flesh it out. And that is the Magical Mystery Tour that most of us know, and eventually became like the canonized international Magical Mystery Tour. This was another one that I think there was a special record day release where they re-released the original mono, or it was included in I think maybe the Blu-ray or DVD re-release of Magical Mystery Tour. I know it did come out. I didn't get it, unfortunately. I would have liked to have gotten it. I did recreate it because when I got like the mono masters, I got the mono masters of Magical Mystery Tour because the original EP was only released, I believe, in mono. So I took those versions from the mono version of Magical Mystery Tour and I recreated the EP that way. So I wanted to recreate it. I have the stereo versions like the Capitol album because I love that too, and I want to also represent that. But so I got the stereo version as the Capitol full-length LP, and then I got the mono versions as the original UK British version. So I can listen to both versions from time to time. And I love it. I think, if anything, the LP version's even better. But I mean, how could this not make my top 20? I mean, goddamn it, just for Fool in the Hill and Blue Jay Way and I Am the Walrus alone. I mean, but I also like Flying in the title track. These songs are all great. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece EP. I love it. I like it better than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is so, but I like every Beatles album more than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is their great psychedelic statement, in my opinion. And I wouldn't say these days it's one of my favorite Beatle albums. It used to be when I was younger, but I still do love it. And if you want to kind of listen to the Mystery Tour in a new way and not the way you're used to with the Capitol record, I suggest putting the EP together, recreating the EP like I did, and listening to it. And it's a cool new experience to hear the songs in this running order and without the singles being added to it. And it's great. It's a perfect little Beatles oddity, and it's a perfect little psychedelic trip for 30 minutes. It's great. I love it. And that's number 12. Okay, number 11. And this is the thing. It's late. I'm getting kind of drunk. And I'm looking at the time. I'm going to do like Mystery Tour. I'm going to do a double EP. So I'm splitting up the top 20. I'm going to do the first 10, which I'm going to finish up here. And then we're going to do the next 10. So we're going to do 20 to 11. And then I'm going to do 10 to 1. So you got to watch part 1. And then you'll watch part 2. And part 2 is when I get to a lot of metal stuff. So you metalheads will definitely have to watch part 2. But hey, you're going to get some metal right now with my last entry right now. Here we go. Number 11, Motorhead. That's right, my favorite band, Motorhead. Beer Drinkers and Hell Raisers. 1980. Hey, some of you are going like, I never heard of this. What the hell? Beer Drinkers and Hell Raisers. Ain't that a ZZ Top song? Although, if you're hip enough to know that's a ZZ Top song, you might be hip enough to know that this exists. Okay, so here we go. Yes, it is a ZZ Top song, and Motorhead covered that ZZ Top song, and it's a badass song. The ZZ Top version's great, and the Motorhead version's great too. So, essentially what this EP is, this EP was a cash-in by the first label that had Motorhead that put out their debut, their 1977 debut, entitled Motorhead. And these were essentially, this EP came out a couple years later in 1980 after the success of Ace of Spades, which was on Bronze Records, another label, not the first label they were on. Just something similar, like Judas Priest's first label did the same thing when they had like just the first 2 albums. When a band becomes successful on another label, and this earlier label has some of the material that the band recorded, then obviously they're going to want to exploit the popularity of the band and sell that stuff. So after Motorhead broke out in a big wave, Face of Spades, this label put together, this early label, they put together this EP, which was comprised of outtakes and songs that didn't make the cut of the first Motorhead album, but they were recorded in those 1977 sessions. Lemmy, Phil the Filthy Animal Taylor, and Fast Eddie Clarke. They did these tracks, and the tracks are Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers, On Parole, Instro, it's a weird instrumental, and I'm Your Witch Doctor. So it was these four songs. On Parole was a hangover from a first aborted attempt that Motorhead Lemmy had with a different lineup. He tried to do an album, which some people will know that as a album that came out later called On Parole. He tried to do a couple of those songs with the new lineup, which at the time, which was Fast Eddie Clarke and Phil the Filthy Animal Taylor, which essentially became the first official lineup, if that didn't confuse you. So he did On Parole. Is like a great kind of rock and roll song. I really love that. Intro is a weird kind of new wave of British heavy metal sounding kind of instrumental. I'm Your Witch Doctor's cool rock and roll tune. I believe that's a cover. Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers, though, is the first track, and that's what they named us on, and that's the best thing on this. And it's an awesome ZZ Top cover. And how could a Motorhead, my favorite band, how could an EP that they put out, and also I'm a big ZZ Top fan too. So how the hell could this not, make my top 20? It's not one of the best things they did, and you can kind of hear why these tracks didn't make the cut. And that's one of the reasons why this doesn't break my top 10. I think it's great. I love it. But I kind of understand why the band didn't put these songs on the first Motorhead album. But still, I'm glad that this first label decided to put out these songs. These days, they usually include these as bonus tracks with the first album. And that's how I got them on a remastered version of the first 1977 Motorhead album. So these 4 tracks are usually thrown in that, along also with City Kids usually gets thrown in, which is another song from those sessions. So I recreated this EP using those bonus tracks. And hell, I mean, just look at that cover. That's a cool ass cover, and it's a cool EP. And again, if you just want a shot of Motorhead rock and roll, boozy, hit in the pub rock and roll, then god damn it, how could you not like Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers? So that's number 11. And I'm boozy now. I'm a little drunk, and I don't want to mess up the top 10. I don't want to mess up the top 10 because these top 10 EPs are amazing. They're great EPs, and I want to get into them. And I got a list. I got it all down here. So I'm going to come back and do part 2 of the top 20 EPs and hit my top 10 favorite EPs of all time. I know you guys are excited to find out what they are, and I'm sure you can guess what a few of them will be, but you might not know what all of them are going to be. So hold on, and I'm going to crash now. Later.